Hello, how's it going?
Banana flick knife. Hello, we're interviewing Banana flick knife today.
You're listening to BornOptimistic. That's Matthew Devereux, today's guest in the background. I was going to do a whole big intro and then just leave his name at the end, but he's here in the background anyway. So you're listening to BornOptimistic, and the occasion of our chat, the chat with Matthew, is Matthew and his band The Pale on November the 6th are playing in the National Concert Hall at an event called Aidling for Turkana. Lots of bands singing with community choirs. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But Matthew, thanks a million.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, sorry for coming in with Banana flick knife. It sounds like the beginning of a Rick and Morty episode. Just come in with something abstract.
Well, I think people might have missed the start of it, which was, what was your line?
Well, it was. I think Banana flick knife is I'll carry a banana around me because I'm a vegetarian. We need a potassium at any given moment, so you carry it around like a 1950s teenager with a flick knife. The worst I could do is actually give you a bad graze with a banana. That's about all.
So Matthew, optimism, it's a word, it's a concept. Where does it sit with you?
Well, it probably stems from you, doesn't it? Like all optimism probably pours from you as a central source. And then I met another optimistic source recently, Declan. And then I realised
your manager.
Yeah, you and Declan knew each other. Of course you did. Because anything coming from the optimistic source, obviously the same rivers. You're part of the same river, really, aren't you?
We're like the modern Masons.
Yeah. See, I'm a nihilist, probably at heart.
I've always wanted to know what that meant. What does it mean?
Well, it's just I pretend that I'm a dark kind of soul. I contemplate the worst and everything, but actually I don't. Most people who pretend to tell you what they are, it's the opposite. Everything is upside down in essence. Everything you know is wrong. So with me, I'm kind of waiting for somebody to tell me there's an issue, and then I'll weigh in with I don't think you should think about it like that. Suddenly I'm the most optimistic person imaginable, but I need somebody else's issue. With my own issues, I just take them on and carry them around. We all have ways that we feed demons, but home medication and homemade medical remedies. But usually the thing that cures me is finding that somebody else has got a real issue and mine means nothing much at all. So that's changed my outlook. Being around people who are open and talk to me about what's going on with them has closed me down as being a sort of a nihilist. Seriously, it has. It stopped me. I really want to be. I want to be dark and brooding. I want to be Nick Cave. But actually, I'm not. It's a shame, but I'm not. I think there's only one Nick Cave, really.
I don't know where to start there.
Yeah.
So I'm still not sure what nihilist means. I remember there was this 80s comedy movie. I can't remember which one it was. It was around the time of Beverly Hills Cop. And those characters in it and they were nihilists and they wore black polo necks that were Germans.
It's Big Lebowski. It's actually Flea is one of the characters. They play a German nihilist, an electro group. Basically, the Kraftwerk. That's who they are. They're pretending to be craft workers in essence.
And they're ruthless assassins. That's to me what a nihilist is. A ruthless assassin with no emotion.
No emotion whatsoever. And it's kind of raised on Nietzsche. And, Friedrich Nietzsche, everyone always gives him a bad rap for the whole God is dead thing. He said God is dead, long live the Superman, actually. That's what he said. It's a lot more optimistic. And I think that's from To Spook Zarathustra. But a lot of people will you got Nietzsche, you got Edgar Allan Poe, bring them together and you've got a classic nihilist because none of this matters anyway,
So that's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's not about having no emotion, it's about nothing matters anyway.
Nothing matters. This is a mortal coil that is cyclic and when you end you begin again, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do within this lifetime because there is no karma. There is no,
Well, fundamentally, I agree with the concept that it doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
Because we all are insects. But at the end of the day, on the flip side, I'd be like, well, it doesn't matter what you do, but why not do your best?
You see, that's what happens, isn't it? You suddenly, as a teen, you have this epiphany that, that this is, a lot of it is just rubbish. A lot of the modern trope of how we should be living, and particularly when I was growing up, when I was just told I needed a two bedroom house in Ballyfermot, and I needed a job with a certain amount of income per year, and so on. I plainly ignored it. And now I find myself sort of, I don't have a mortgage, I don't have a wife, and I don't have children. And I think maybe that was from growing up under the shadow of a nuclear bomb, being an 80s kid, you know, being told that all this was going to end anyway. You begin to develop. You developed you as an ongoing project that wasn't gonna solidify when you were an adult. You know that fear you had that when you hit 30, which is a big age when you were a teen, 30 was it. It was over, and that you'd be solidified. You'd be it. You'd be complete, and then you realize you weren't. You know, then you get to this. You get to this age now. I'm 40. What am I? I'm 46. I'm 46 now. So you get to that age, and I look around now. Obviously, you see midlife crisis, and you see various other things going, which are brilliant. That's all changed as well. It's no longer the red sports car and the teenage girlfriend and stuff like that. Midlife crisis is taking on all different forms now.
How do they manifest themselves now? What do you observe?
Well, I just observe different things. I think, like suddenly getting into property late in your life, or thinking that there's I don't know that you. It's changed. It's in a more controlled environment. We're all up to our necks. Recently we're up to our necks in science fiction these days. Where we can lose ourselves a lot easier. Like you said, we're everything from Netflix to kind of seeing people queue for salad. Yeah, do you know what I mean? It's like I'm a vegetarian. Don't get me wrong, but when I see a queue and then I ask people, what's everyone queuing for? I say, oh, it's this salad place, Chopped, those places, and you're going. This has changed, and suddenly I think a midlife crisis can take itself in that you suddenly start taking care of yourself. You suddenly realize that I don't have to be, and
self-destructive.
Yeah, self-destructive. Like I don't have to say that it's absolutely game over. I don't have to exercise now because I just let myself go. I've got a wife. I'm not going to get another wife. I don't need to put myself out in the market. And no, there's so much for people to dip into now. It's like
Chopped, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what drives me crazy about Chopped? Now, I've never been in a branch of Chopped, but I've looked in a window.
Oh, yeah, you should go in.
So it's all about salad, healthy for you, blah blah blah. But it comes to these big plastic bowls.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there not like a massive contradiction at the very heart of that?
There is. I find myself doing the old guys thing. I'm not a dad, but I kind of talk like a dad sometimes. And you're doing the recycling, and you're going, why is no plastic recyclable? And you only end up with basically a bag full of paper and cans. And that's it. Nothing else is recyclable. And you see that little arrow thing, you have to know the difference in between them all. Like I went back to school in the last 3 years, and one of the subjects I did was home economics, right? So in home economics, you have to learn all of that now about what all the little symbols mean. So some of them mean that the little arrow one that like the snake eating its own tail, that means that a certain percentage of the packaging goes towards recycling, but you can't recycle it, and it seems contradiction in terms.
I kid myself by recycling it all.
Yeah, you can't do it, honestly. I have it written on the wall in front of me.
What happens if you do? If you put stuff that's not recyclable in the recycling, what happens?
I don't know. I don't think you get fined or anything like that. Somebody else probably processes that for you. As I said, I'm living in a period of time where everything you do, you've got a job at. In essence, I go into Tesco's and then suddenly I'm working the tills. Beep! I'm using that machine. I'm going, I never wanted a job at the till in Tesco's, but now that I've got one, I'm going.
That's progress. We're tricked into doing other people's jobs.
Honestly, that's essentially what we did. And they were like, "Don't worry, when you grow up, son, robots are going to be doing everything." Why have I suddenly got a job in beep Tesco's? And then after you get all that stuff home, then you're going through it, the packaging going, okay, I got to get this one goes in this, and this one's got. Why am I doing this job now as well? I didn't.
And then back in our grandparents' time, everything was wrapped in brown paper.
Yeah. I kind of have a preference for that, but I do have... Brown paper was discretion too. There's a certain amount of discretion with shopping that we don't do now. We've lost that sort of...
We don't get to decide the amount of what we purchase.
Well, yeah, but also what we purchase as well is less... It used to be a thing where my mother wouldn't get certain things in a supermarket for fear that somebody else would see her getting there. And they'd know your business. You don't want them knowing your business.
Like what exactly? Do you think?
Well, I grew up with 4 sisters, so they'd send me down to the shop with a note, And you go down on Saturday morning with a note and you go, Mister, can you have this? And they give you 10 pence and you be able to get, wherever else you wanted, a big time bar or, But then he'd hand you over this brown package. And it's basically sanitary towels. Right?
That's what you couldn't buy in a supermarket.
You just didn't do that. You just didn't do it. And I'd be going down the road with this brown package until eventually, like 4th or 5th trip, I just cracked and went, I have to see what this is. I have to see what it is. So, don't know how suddenly that came into it, but it just shows you how how times have changed.
I used to use my mother's sanitary towels as emergency stretchers for Action Man.
Yeah, they're perfect. Do you know what? I was gonna go one further. This is probably too far.
If you think it is, you know what? It probably is.
Yeah.
So, tell me about your childhood. The formative influences that made you who you are and put you on your path. Like what were they? Who were they?
Who would be? I've got loads of who. So I'm still a fanboy. I haven't lost that. There's other people around me that talk this thing to me every now and again. That talk this routine where they say that they don't listen to contemporary music because they don't want it to interfere with their creative impulses and meaning you don't want to be influenced. I listen to absolutely everything. I watch everything and I listen to everything still. So when it comes to influence, it's changing. It's like I see it like a stagnant pool sometimes, and the heavy influences begin to fall to the bottom, and the new ones become this green algae, this new, exciting green algae, and it hasn't. Well,
or a layer of scum at the top.
Or a layer of scum on top. Yeah, but sometimes that's what it just turns into because it's been lying in the heat too long, and that's hype. So that's what I think hype is. Like, there's certainly been acts over the years that I've you fall out of love with as well. But that's okay. You don't have to be in love all the time. Nobody told you that you had to be.
Why music at all in the first place then? When did music come into your life?
Music and cinema happen at the same time. I'm completely convinced of that. When you see how it works in balance, the moment you see the kid playing the banjo in Deliverance, you realise that they can't be separated. And even when you hear the music separately, you hear the dual and banjo separately, you cannot separate the image from it. So something happens there, and I think that's what really happened for me was the image, putting the voice to the face. The first time I saw Nick Cave's face, I'd heard him on Birthday Party, and it's just this wild, like a crow singing. And then you see his face, and you begin to realise, this is how I imagined, William Blake or Milton to look like.
There had to be someone before Nick Cave.
Oh, yes, certainly. Elvis. First thing I was ever interested in would be Elvis. For 7-inch I ever bought was One Love by Bob Marley, and then Elvis became a preoccupation, became an obsession.
So you were 5 or 6 when Elvis died.
Yeah.
Do you remember hearing?
The first music I remember hearing is Bowie. The first I remember Space Oddity as being the first thing I ever heard. And staring into the centre where the speaker, the cabinets that you used to have, there's wonderful cabinets, and your mum would still put stuff on top, and then the music would play, and it'd be vibrating. You'd be like, you can't put that on top. But I remember Space Oddity being the first time I felt like I was holding spinning plates. That was Space Oddity. That moment where you're not sure you're on footing anymore. That moment where you're kind of rubbing your belly one way and your head the other. That trick that you used to do when you were kids because it disorientated you. And so Space Oddity disorientated me. I didn't think art could be that beautiful, So it'd be that and early 70s cinema mixed with seeing an alien land like Bowie, realising that we could actually be more than our presumed allotted, our lot in life as we were given, that we could transcend it,
When did it come closer to home? When did you realise that that could be you?
Punk. Because at the same time, in between the beautiful music, my sisters listened to prog, my brother listened to punk. So with me,
are you the baby in the family?
I'm the baby, of 7, and I'm at the very bottom. So I ended up with everyone's record collections. So I see Highway to Hell, Hunky Dory, and Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols as the same sort of thing.
You're like 5, 6, 7, and they're there. You're not reading reviews in the NME to tell you which ones you like.
Well, by the time I was 6, Nevermind the Bollocks was on us. That had landed upon us. So I was sort of a child punk, and then I was taken under the wing of like what would have been local skinheads, and that would be more my early teens. Would it be bands like, indie bands like the Smiths and stuff, but also the Specials, Selector, Beat.
Well, what age were you when you first shaved your head?
Maybe 16.
And was this a combating hair loss, or was this a fashion decision?
Do you know what? It was kind of art, but art is always precognitive, right? It always knows more. So in essence, when I did start going bald around 21...
It was that young?
Oh, yeah. Most people didn't notice at all. I just started... it just started to get used to me as being shaven-headed, but... Yeah, I think it knew more about what I was going to be. And what I really wanted to do with that was to rid myself of the vanity of rock. I didn't want anything got to do with that aspect of rock.
And was it traumatic for you at 21, the idea of going bald? Because I would have seen the opposite of roots, the first absence of roots of that at around 21 as well. But I've taken a different approach.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I kind of like your Julian Assange sort of approach.
I'm just rocking a comb over of a sorts or comb back.
You're always going to get kicked in. The American government are going to arrest you, and he'll just think you're Assange. He'll say, "No, that's not me. That's him. He's involved in that leak." I was never really asked that question ever. Was that traumatic? And I think maybe it was, actually. I think maybe to a degree it was, but not for long. It wouldn't have been for long. See, I had other things happen to me around that age that made sort of, male pattern baldness seem irrelevant, and I would have been of that attitude when I was younger as well. I dare you to throw anything you want at me and see if I don't stand up. I was more, I knew I wanted to be a survivor in that respect. I didn't want to go under to vanity. I didn't want to go under to greed. I didn't want to play ball. So sometimes I found myself just standing alone. So that's sort of what it does is individuality leads to isolation initially. And
adversity breeds resilience. Glenn on the show last week talking about just that. And do you want to talk about that adversity? Do you think it's something that defines you? Is it?
Well, maybe it does define me. I don't know what happened to anger in music. I don't know where it went. It became the poor cousin. As Nick Cave, said about sorrow, he said it sat at the back of the class pissing its pants. Do you know what I mean? It didn't have a place in music. He was like, no, we don't want that. We don't want to hear your confessionals. We don't want to hear that angle.
That hasn't stopped a lot of people.
No, it hasn't at all. So by the time I came around to the first 2 mini albums, there is some anger on them. And for me, that's a victory. You take anger and you manhandle it, and you kind of brush its hair, and you make it respectable. Saying I'm going to bring you out in public. I have to bring you out in public. I have to show people that you exist also. Apathy in rock was the thing I was absolutely railing against.
But you're talking about anger without talking about where it came from.
For me, it would be my upbringing. Would be certainly be the root of it. I did not have an ordinary upbringing at all. And because I was left to fend for myself so young, I had to put a lot of stuff aside. I had to pretend or pertain to an adult existence.
What kind of age?
Around 15, 16, you know. So that's why I had to drop. I had to drop out of school. I was an academic enough minded child, but I had to drop out of school. I had no support, you know, at all. So I ended up.
So you had to fend for yourself economically as well as emotionally.
Yeah.
So this is when you started your signwriting apprenticeship.
Yeah, I'd been doing the signwriting apprenticeship because it paid, and it was helping me do school and a signwriting apprenticeship at the same time. And then much later, well, not much later, around 16, 17, I started working in Bad Bob's in Temple Bar. And I worked as a kind of a short order chef. And I did all that, you know, people would pay the Bad Bob's and then have a meal at midnight. And
for the license, you had to for the license.
Yeah, you had to for the license. So I got to meet sort of great visiting country acts, great people like Wilco Johnson and people like that who kind of took me under the wing somewhat, and when, you know,
country music.
Yeah. And then the visiting acts to the Olympia, like Johnny Cash and Dolly Parton, and we used to do the food for them. So I used to bring the food in and set up the tables for them and do all of that in the Olympia. And, you know, and Johnny Cash was the first, I don't know, was he the first megastar I sort of met? And I didn't really know who he was, to a degree. And I knew him because I grew up in Elvis, obviously, but I just knew him as Evil Elvis. So he gave me a huge tip, I remember, right, for 50 quid at the time. But you had to sit down, you had to say grace and sit with him and June Carter, and 50 quid, yeah, which is a load. Which I spent
like €500 now.
Oh, dude, it was serious money. But I spent a good bit of it on records by Johnny Cash, which is a beautiful move by him. I think that's what I'd do. You know, if there was a teenage kid who was coming in, like leaving food in your dressing room, and like you had an opportunity, you had the dough, I'll give him some money and say, just look, at least buy one Pale record, at least buy one, like, you know.
So you sat and said grace with Johnny Cash.
Yeah, I did, yeah. Before I even could formulate what that meant.
And did music lead you to working in Bad Bob's, or did working in Bad Bob's lead to you working in music?
I ask myself the question all the time. It was the idea of working backstage at these events. Like, you don't forget, around that period of time, was it Tom Waits had been there in 86. He did his big time show tour around 86, and Cash is in a bad part of his career. He was in a sort of a, I don't know if he even sold out that night in the Olympia, to be honest. But he was on the decline.
But he was still giving you. But he was giving you £50. Like the ticket to see him probably cost about £5. He gave you 10 times the cost of a ticket.
Yeah, really.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. in all honesty, it was. He's quite a remarkable guy. But also, he was on his arse. They were putting out Johnny Cash records they were pressing 500 copies of it, and that was it. Look at that period of time, and you realise he couldn't make a record. He was hugely prolific, but he could not make a record. I remember like the sisters. I remember June being really buoyant, and she's got to be the reason why he kept afloat, not any shape or form, because.
But do you think him and Dolly Parton and Bad Bob's in general, this world of country?
Yeah, that would have been it. Yeah,
this led you to music.
Yeah, it led me to music because what they spoke about was generally honest. The whole idea is that you'll never run out of anything to write about once you just write about what you know. So it was that, and I remember looking at it and thinking, okay, you know, if I address where I'm from. Then maybe I'll connect. I knew that music was about connecting with the people you were singing with, not singing to. You were singing with them in a sense. That's the whole idea. So that's why, you know, around that record it'd be you know Butterfly, for example, is just about growing up in about a feeling that a whole generation had abandoned me in a sense. Everyone I knew who I wanted to know, who I would have looked up to was migrating. And I put the migration on. I just used the analogy of a pupa, caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly, the whole idea that when people come of age, they fly away, and so that's why and that's what I'm talking about. The empty suburbs that I grew up in. And
is this when you started writing songs for the first time around this age?
Yeah. So that's why I find some of those couplets from the first album that I'll obviously cringe at, because, and the reason I've analysed that, and it's just because they're so barefacedly honest, some of them, and the others are really I understood that I could not lead everybody on a stark, I couldn't be too honest as such. And you need enigma. You need you need some protection from art as well. Otherwise, it will burn you if you think that you're the kid with the magnifying glass and art is the ant, but actually you're the ant and art is the kid with the magnifying glass. You leave yourself too exposed. You'll be wiped out just for the joy of it, just to see it burn.
But you were there having to support yourself, and yet, exposing yourself to burning under the magnifying glass is still more attractive than being a signwriter or working in a kitchen.
Well, yes, and no. I was happy doing both. It wasn't until I realised. It wasn't until I remember performing something like Butterfly for the first time in front of an audience, and we rehearsed 5 days a week for 6 months. Okay, and then someone stupidly gave us a support slot, and we came out of the traps like greyhounds. So I remember standing up on stage and doing Butterfly for the first time, and first time an audience had ever seen it, and first time an audience had set their eyes on us. So you have me, as you said, in that shaven headed, and Shane with the tin quiff, and Sean, I don't know what he was rocking. But
frilly shirt.
Yeah, frilly shirt. I think he's doing anything just to not be like us. But it was a weird experience for an audience to start with. But I realised that Butterfly did something. It actually moved people. And then songs like I Want to Steal Your Car just dealt with directly where I was from. Just directly. Unflinching. Most times, years later, folk singers become talk about, say, oh yeah, I'm actually from a really bad suburban area, but I've never you don't address it in song, but I was straight into addressing it with song in a country and western sort of honesty. That's probably what I learned from Bad Bobs and Johnny Cash, and it's good to see people squirm a little bit too. Be honest, and you cannot be called a liar. But also learn how to keep some enigma. Dogs With No Tails is a great example of it, of keeping the enigma.
But everything you were doing was so wrapped in all ththese bright colours, was brought out into the world as pop. So it's all anger wrapped up in Dayglow.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I'm like, really, why not? There was anger has its place in pop in the same way. It's that moment with the Smiths when you begin to realise that the joke's on you. It's the girlfriend in a coma moment, when the people who take something like that earnestly, and then you walk in the kitchen and your mother's singing it while doing the dishes because she thinks it's a lovely melody. It's a lovely melody, isn't it? He's a lovely man, that Morrissey man. His mum must be so proud. He's a little bit fey, but he's not. He's all right. He's a little bit fey, but he's all right. Should be a t-shirt.
And the very last line of the song is, I know. It's really serious.
Yeah. And it's just that. It's just when you realise that you can still you can retain stuff and package it in pop. Pop's just become such a dormant, sort of castrated form when it wasn't. It really wasn't.
Yeah, but we're not of the age for pop.
Yeah, we're not of the age for pop.
So if you're 18, 17, 16, 14, 15, does pop feel like that? I know it doesn't to my 9-year-old son.
Yeah. Yeah, but then it's never really going to talk about, because it's become homogenous. The subject matter has become homogenous. There's that great James Murphy line on the last LCD Sound System album where he says, and everyone's just singing tonight, tonight, tonight.
There he is.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you still angry? And I think you are. What are you angry about?
I personally think we've been sold a lie about what art can do. It's been taken away from the people who need it as a voice as such. I was never taught music in school. We would like tell you, if we give them a tambourine, they'll hit each other.
Where did you grow up and go to school ever?
Coolock. I went Coolock. I never finished my education there, but I went back in 2014. I went back to finish my Leaving Cert. So I went back to school for 2 years, and then I went on and did archaeology after that. But I wanted to reclaim my teens. Basically, what I heard myself talk out of the corner of my mouth one night about how little education I had, and I just really didn't want that to be if I felt bad about it, why didn't I do something about it?
Did you feel any smarter for having gone back to your Leaving Cert?
Yeah, I did actually. I felt smarter in the sense that nobody else I knew was experiencing this. I wasn't doing it with anybody of my own age group. None of my friends were going to do this or have done this. So I felt smarter, as in I felt like I saw at the top of a summit. And when I get back down, I could tell other people that it exists. And instead of us just we tend to think other things are really, really important. Meanwhile, we decry the injustices done to us in our pasts, and we don't try to fix them. We always think that there's no time. So meanwhile, like, I'm told that in middle age, I'm not supposed to be thinking about those things. I should be getting ready for something else.
Your pension?
Yeah. Health insurance, which I don't have. Pension, which I don't have. All of these things. So I actually you can either feel afraid, unprepared, or you can reinforce yourself, like make active decisions. I know it was difficult trying to be me and be in college at the same time, and even in the middle of it, I ended up doing that Apollo House thing, and then my cover was blown. Because I kept it, as far as I was concerned, I kept it as quiet as possible. But 3 months in, my maths teacher comes in one morning and he goes, "Great gig last night." And he'd been in the Olympia to something that we'd done, Pieta House or something. He went, "Great gig last night." And then he put it together, who I was. And I had to go to him and kind of go, "Dude, just don't tell anyone I'm a musician," or, I didn't want that part of my character to be the thing that gets pushed out in front of you. I hate it sometimes. You get introduced that it's like someone putting the word musician in front of your name. Musician, Matthew Devereux. Or, it seems like real limited,
I'm a whole person?
Yeah.
How dare you define me by one single aspect of my whole being?
So, yeah, I think,
But I think in general being defined by your work kind of sucks.
You're gonna be, so you're gonna have to make sure that what you do is good, But you also have to allow people time under the radar, without, it's the what he's building in there principle. It's that Tom Waits idea. What's he building in there? So, you got out to the shed and there's noises coming out of it. No one's quite sure, but there's a certain amount of privacy, applied to art.
So you went back to school, you finished your Leaving Cert, and then with that you studied archaeology. Why archaeology?
Archaeology and folklore, because that's essentially what I'm sort of becoming. I'm becoming like a folklorist. I'm trying to keep certain stories alive, and then use them also use them in new ways. How do you do that? How do you? It's the great hipster dilemma. How do you take something that's arcane and had one function and then reuse it for another function? Like, on Contents of a Shipwreck, when I start writing, I start letting the prose part of what I do come alive. And there's a song on it called "A Final Garden" where I've imagined Adam and Eve to be in the Book of Revelations, and to read the Bible like you would the Quran, where you read it from right to left. So actually, you start in Revelations and you move towards Genesis. So I put Adam and Eve as preparing for the final days. They're actually preparing for the final meal in the final garden and the final absolutely everything. And that is more of that's more like folklore. That's more like taking a great motif of a story that everyone's familiar with, and then using it in a different way to open the minds to something new, to reuse, to recycle, these tropes, because, rock's got loads of them. It's like, how do you make blues sound fundamental again? It's the White Stripes analogy. How do you do that? You sort of limit yourself. You go, it's going to be red and white and black, and that's the only three colors I want to use. There's going to be three chords, and it's going to be under 3 minutes. Set rules, and sometimes rules are the very thing that break new ground. It's not this like have it all as open-ended as possible means anything can go, and means it's going to take a long time for you to form something that doesn't sound like it's a cornucopia of ideas. It's fine having a rich palette in front of you, but I want a plate and a cheese sandwich on it. I want to be able to take all of this and say, but what do we really want, everybody? Would everybody be okay with a cheese sandwich? Yeah, I enjoy looking at the fruit. It's like your mom. Look at that fruit bowl. It's lovely. And that's all it is. No one eats it. Do you know what I mean? It's a fruit bowl. That's why it existed in people's houses as a decoration. So I wanted to get away from decorative art and get it down to just fundamental. So how do I break all this down to be.
And are you applying all this to the Pale?
Yeah, and always have. It's even changed. It's the dynamics of it's changed a little bit, because I've been trying out different forms. I'm always trying to challenge myself to if I wrote. Notoriously, sometimes I can write big songs, like really long, involving 16, 20 verses songs. And as soon as I did that, and someone remarked on it, I went, well, actually, I think you're right. Maybe I should go back to try to write a song with 15 words or 25 words. That's the Iggy Pop rule, where he says 25 words or else it's not a song. If you can't say it in 25 words, don't try to say it at all. Who do you think you are? Like John Milton, just you're just in the rock band. Get your point of view across quickly. So each song. Great pop music works like me trying to pitch something to you. It's like that moment in The Player where Richard E. Grant's trying to pitch something in 60 seconds, yeah? And he's saying, imagine it, it's candles, umbrellas, the rain's coming down. And like he's trying to, and he has no idea what he's really pitching either, but they're going to bite at something. He doesn't really care. But it's a bit like that sometimes. It's that if you can get the pitch right and you can sell an idea,
I still find myself wanting to know why music. Why is music the vehicle which you're using to propel yourself through life?
Because no one dances to cinema. Frank Zappa said talking about music is like trying to dance to architecture. But again, I'm talking about something that doesn't exist as well. I'm in a business of a sleight of hand, like we're supposed to be getting by pushing the air, and sometimes the air we push is more valuable than this air that we pushed. We don't have a choice. We thought that this one was going to be really good, but you never know with music. It's actually still mysterious. That's what I love about it.
But why? Like you don't want to be known as musician, Matthew Devereux, but most of your adult life has been dedicated to music. Why?
Because it's invisible. I can't harm it. It pours out of us. It's absolutely invisible. It's not a building. It can't be resold in that respect. And it's a moment in time. You're rushing out with a canvas, trying to paint a mushroom cloud. That's how I feel about music sometimes when it's done right, and that's why sometimes after the fact it feels like you haven't thought, you didn't think about it enough. You just hit while the iron was hot, and you didn't really know what you were doing. You were acting blindly, and sometimes that's it. It's profound. It's art. No one needs to go to college to produce music. No one needs anything to produce music. You're born. The most important vehicle or instrument is the human voice, and you can't buy that. You can't. People are born with it, you know, and it doesn't exist. It only exists in these practical forms. I'm looking at vinyl and CDs and everything else, but when it doesn't actually exist, it's not like cinema. I can't look at it and say, look at Robert Redford there. He's amazing, and that's 1974, and he's using this light and the whole lot. And music's it's just pushing the air. That's all it's doing. It's wild.
And when did you realise you had a voice?
Maybe about the age of 13, when I started doing my first demos around 13. My sister got a keyboard for Christmas that had a little sample ability on it. You could get the dog to bark, and you go. And I loved that. So I took that from her because I kind of thought she's going to grow bored of that. She's not even going to learn it. And I'd start demoing on it immediately. I demoed with 2 tape recorders, because you demo with one, record it on the other, and you can keep kind of bouncing them back and forth, and like you can do it endlessly with 2 tape recorders. So I started demoing from a young age. So I realized that I had a voice.
So this is pre-Bad Bob's. It wasn't Bad Bob's fault at all.
Yeah, from the age of 13, I was making demos, and I realized that I could pour myself into making this music, and I had something that at once was invisible, and but at the same time was something that was going to outlive me. And maybe because it is invisible, it can't decay, it can't die. But then again, it only exists within the confines of everything from gravity, and like it doesn't exist in space. For example, I make something that doesn't exist in space.
Well, I just think there, that's the bad thing about Mick's album. Mick Christopher's album, like Mick is gone now 16 years, and now because the album's out again on vinyl, radio have started playing it again.
Yeah,
the music hasn't changed, Mick's status hasn't changed, but the music now is a new lease of life just because something has happened.
Mick's a special case, though. That's a special case. That's a particularly profound. I had to use that term. I sound like someone else I know. It's a profound record, actually. So I think maybe. Is it loss that makes us realize is it that classic human thing that we don't really know what we've had, or until it's actually gone?
You don't know what you got till it's gone. That was either Lauren Hill or Whitney Houston.
Paved paradise.
Put up a parking
lot. It's Joni Mitchell.
And I was crediting Lauren Hill.
Oh, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? Paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Oh, sha-la-la-la. Took all the trees, put them in a tree museum.
But it is a wonderful life. Like the thing that I like about music, apart from the pleasure that it gives me, it sounds so trite now that I hear the words in my head before I say them out loud. But the people.
Yeah. It does sound trite, doesn't it? It's
why are egomaniacs so interesting?
Are they really egomaniacs?
Well, I was just giving another
because the sociopaths and the psychopaths, they all have different jobs than us. They work in banks, and they control people's lives. Like there's people in vulture funds that are clearly psychotic and sociopathic, and I find less and less of them in art. So I actually think that's where we went. I just don't think there is so-called mad people in art. I mean, people who are just so idiosyncratic and individual that they seem like a threat in the local village. They'd be like, We don't like your kind around here. And you walked in. That's how the world seems sometimes when you're making art. It's that you feel like you've just walked into a village that the whole bar turns around at the same time. But that was part of the beauty of it as well, to stand out. I remember because I'd walked to. Remember having them. You have a shaven head. I'd be walking through Coolock, and everything would be fine about that. Everything's fine about that, Except people would be like, you look like you look like you have cancer, right? You're out of a concentration camp. Just the most sensitive things imaginable. But then I remember I wore a pink Fred Perry, and then I got homophobia, and I began to think that's interesting. All I did was wear a pink T-shirt, and I got homophobia for it. So I remember being asked to do a Kilmeaden Bikers Festival, and that was the first time I went down and I looked at the bikers, and I thought, why do they want us for a start? I went, okay. I says, I'm going to see what these guys are made out of, So I put on a dress, and I walked out in a dress, and they lost their minds. But in a good way.
I was going to say good or bad.
No, in a good way. Because that's the sort of thing, about 3 o'clock in the morning, Kilmeaden Bikers Festival, there'd probably be a guy who weighs 22 stone in a dress, rolling in the mud. There's a certain, not just a madness, there's a gender fluidity and everything going on. And like everyone has bikers boxed off as being, beer drinking, misogynistic, and actually within that community was just, you allowed to be anything you wanted to do. I remember doing that and just seeing the response. I kind of threw the gig. I used to do it every now and again. I'd throw a gig and just give it to the audience and then see what happens. So, and then there was a kid got up who just made his communion or his confirmation, and he was there with his folks, and I got him up to sing, which everyone like, totally into that. But by that point, I'd completely forgotten what we were doing in the set. The whole lot just became a performance. So
you like provoking people.
I liked it then. It's not just provoking. It's to change expectations. Because as soon as the British, the first thing that they latched onto was a skinhead image. And they thought, are you skinhead? I'm going, what's the skinhead even mean? And then years later, Shane Meadows, eventually says what I've been talking about for years, that the movement itself was taken and perverted into the right wing. And Thatcher herself actually actively wanted the National Front to be a thing, her foot soldiers of bigotry. When actually, I went to school with the only black kid in the neighbourhood. The Ampedu's, the two black kids in the same family, adopted. And they got me into blue beat and ska and reggae and everything else. But what it meant to me, it meant the kind of the future, a future that your kids and stuff are going to be living in, where it's multicultural. We don't even think about it anymore. And that's what the Specials meant to me. To see a multicultural band of mixed influence, and then see what they were singing about. Straight, stark, direct, and of course you're going to dance to that. I'm going to dance to Too Much Too Young. Yeah. Oh, you're 15, you're pregnant. Of course I'm dancing. I understand it. So they took what I thought was something beautiful. And they manipulated it into being something that just crass, and and the more skinhead movies that they make, where they focus on the right wing, the crasser it will become. But Shane Meadows will always be able to drag it back to This Is England, saying this is what they did.
And he bring it back.
Yeah, they took a youth movement and they perverted it.
I remember, like years before the whole Apollo House thing happened, I remember yourself and Glenn around Christmas time, quite a few years, would sneak off and like do impromptu gigs in drying out houses and hostels. And how did all that come about? And I don't know, how did where did your interest in helping homeless people come from and stem from?
From being a teen and being dropped into the middle of the city and left to fend from myself, I always felt like I was an inch away from being homeless. And yeah, I've slept rough a couple of nights, but I think everyone should do that at some point or another. We used to just call it camping. It was an adventure. But I've done that where you've gotten out to Bray, you don't have the bus fare back, and you have to sleep outside the toilets, and then you end up, there's a bunch, like being on the street means that you meet these people. But busking as well really, really, really did it as well. Glenn will tell you the same thing. Is that when we go to the Coffee Inn, like some people you give money out of your case to. But that's the most perfect thing about Once is the opening 10 minutes. That's just that says it all to me, But because the first time I moved out was with my mother, and we ended up in a two single bedrooms, two single beds in one room, and then there's a cupboard, and you open the cupboard and there's a bathroom in there, and then there's another cupboard beside it, and the kitchen's there, right? And meanwhile, I'm still a teenage kid, and I have a BMX, and I have a ramp going between my mum's bed and my bed, and I'd be in the flat, just up in the ramp, anything to stop myself going crazy like a gerbil on a wheel. But I remember seeing how vulnerable she was, and seeing how nobody really cared in a sense. The house we lived in was full of those bed sits and people who were on the way out. Actually, they probably got 5 or 10 years left in their life, and they just lived on it. They had a chip pan, and they had a deep fat fryer, and that was it. You could smell it every day when you went into the house. And all. So for me, it's all about that, and to see the similar faces. I've seen similar faces on the street, but you begin to project. And I project directly onto them, because how I avoided homelessness is more than likely music. Music saved me wholesale. It's that great moment where you do realise that there's a song called Mother Nature is a Man, and we used to just call it Moneymaker, because anytime we played it 3 chords, it just made sense. It's kind of got this African Soweto sort of cool African thing going on. Shane, of course, but that made me realise that I had a choice that if we were short of money, we'd busk, And when Shane moved in with me, that was the same principle, and that's how Grafton Street began. But there, we were looked on actually as just a step up from being homeless. That's probably really where it comes from. Do you know that? That's probably, after me filtering through all of this, Glenn would probably tell you the same thing. When you were busking, that's how you were looked on. So the more that you're told, it's like being told over and over again, eventually you begin to believe it yourself. And you begin to feel that way. And that, hence, if we weren't really looked on like that by society itself, then why were the homeless guys, why did they gravitate to us? Why did we all become the same thing? Why did we all end up sitting in the Coffee Inn and, spending what you just earned, and then after you finish that coffee and, plate of chips or whatever, you go back out and you try earn enough for breakfast. You live in meal by meal, and it was kind of exciting, to be honest. It was kind of exciting.
Now, the last few years that you've actively tried to help the lot of people who find themselves homeless, what have you learned from that?
I'm not afraid of I'm not afraid of the government. I'm not afraid of the police. I'm not afraid of society. I think, what I've learned is I truly believe in what we're doing is right. And I'm not afraid of anybody trying to stop it. Trying to, oh God, it's like when you're doing work for charity and everybody's saying, all charities are corrupt. Do you know that one? And you're going, well, if that was the attitude, some diseases are airborne. Why do you even get up? Why do you even bother? Actually, do you know some people just trip and fall down the stairs and that's it, and there's nobody around. Do you know some people? You know, you could just keep going on that one, saying like, you know, the justification for not doing anything, and I sort of realized that it'd be the same thing saying, you know, it's like the Apollo House thing where you were saying the police can arrest you, and saying, well, you know, then I you know, it maybe that will draw even more attention to it. I've no bother going into it, and I know Glenn was of the same mind. So we'd be gladly sitting in Store Street going, well, you know, you tried to arrest us for busking, try to tell us that was begging as well. So I don't know. What have I learned from it? People don't always appreciate you trying to help. They really don't. The people around you get more afraid for you. And there's actually a lot of resistance to us changing things. And
when you say by people, do you mean
the Irish people? I think sometimes we're just happy. We're not happy with a lot, but we just put up with it as such. A lot of the sort of the revolutionary spirit that we talk about. That was the most disheartening thing about the celebrations in 1916, right? And to see, you know, us celebrating during a period of time where there's more homeless than there was during the famine. You know, there wasn't a lot to celebrate. You know, I hate to be cruel about it, but, you know.
It would freak me out. If you look at the TV footage of the 50th centenary celebrations and the 100, it was just armoured cars driving down O'Connell Street. What the hell is that about?
Yeah. And what does that mean? Dressing up as soldiers to go into the late as well. I puked into a bucket, to be honest. You know, but you don't have to use that quote. But you know
why not?
Yeah. Oh, that was the last time I was ever in the late.
No, I think, well, hopefully you'll be on it again soon again.
Well, yeah, I don't know what. Honestly, what I learned is that other people, that we've lost some of that revolutionary spirit, and I think we need it back really, really badly. It's about to get increasingly worse. And it's not just the homeless that we were standing up for; it's the hidden homeless as well. Like I don't even now. I live by grace of a friend. Like I can't afford a place in the city. I've been priced out of this place like about 2 years ago, at least. So I'm hidden homeless. That's probably the best answer I could give you. And I have been since I got back from Prague in 2010. Like for 7 years now, I've not 2011. I came back from Prague, but you know.
Does that bother you?
You know what? If I wasn't vetted, or if I wasn't what do you say, formed in that mold when I was younger, then I'd be afraid now. I really would. I think that everything I ever worked towards has just fallen apart. I don't have security. I don't have hope. That's what would be falling apart for me right now. But there's a part of me that I still understand that things have an odd way of working themselves out. It depends on what you give out to the universe, you'll get back and all of that. But I think I'd be more afraid if I hadn't experienced this before. You know, I'd feel like I failed because I didn't get on the property ladder. You know, the greasy property ladder that we're all told to get on. I'd feel like if I really was invested in the modern concepts of what makes me a success, I would feel I would feel like such a failure.
But I think the thing that really impresses me is you still have the energy, the fire, the passion. And I know there's a lot of really exciting pale things about to come. Yeah. And I have a feeling we're going to have to continue this conversation when more of those are revealed. But the National Concert Hall, November 6th, Aidling for Turkana. I know you're doing Butterfly, and what's the other track?
We're doing Lose Your Friends, aren't we?
Lose Your Friends and Butterfly with the Legally Sound choir from Burn Wallace. With a choir, you're with Legally Sound. Yeah. So I can't wait to see that. nch.ie for tickets, and it's all in aid of Aidling. And that brings us to the end.
Brilliant. I hope some of that can be used to.
All of it will be used.
Oh no! Don't use all of it.
Thank you. Talk to you next week. Bye.